Hey, it's KR of D&D Homebrew, talking today about exotic minerals in a fantasy world. And first of all, this came up because I was Googling around one day and I came across this mineral. It's the rarest mineral in the world, chawtuite. It's pronounced, it's spelled with a K, but pronounced cha or chawtuite. There's only one example that's ever been found. It was found in Burma, and it's named after the mineralogist who identified it. There is only one known example. And it has some unique properties. You can look this up. But of course, as is my wont at all times, I relate everything to fantasy RPGs, right? Creating worlds, creating items, creating exotic minerals. Because in a fantasy setting, they can do anything. And partly this then inspired, I did this thing on these light emitting minerals for my Patreon. It's something that I'm doing on in the campaign that I'm running with Pathfinder, and that's a whole nother story. But the idea was these minerals would emit light. They wouldn't be a hot light. They would last a long time. You could break them up to a certain extent into smaller pieces, although the larger pieces glowed more brightly, whatnot. And I thought if you had such a mineral, it would be highly valuable because light is something that is really useful for human eyes that can't see in the dark to operate at night, to have their cities lit, to, or their homes and whatnot, much less when they're exploring. And this mineral I just made up, right? It's a fantasy world. And so then as I got thinking, I'm like, well, man, you could have a lot of different exotic minerals that could do different things that the players could come across. And if they, first of all, if it's an existing mine, they could just buy something. Or if they, went in with people and knew about an ore of this mine, they could, create a mine and use this, get some cash. Because, in a lot of campaigns, if you don't have just huge treasure hoards sitting around, which I don't in the current Pathfinder that I'm running, you need to find money somehow. And the players do that. They go out and they do stuff. They have rules for downtime. A lot of systems to do things. I tend to like to do it in the context of discovering some, gold mine or timber resource or something like that, or setting up some business, a tavern where we decide upon the generating of income. So you always have not just the usage of this, which is what it kind of starts with. They find something like this exotic mineral, and then can they find out the source of it? But even just finding examples of it would be cool. So for example, if you have a light emitting mineral, what about a light absorbing mineral? What about a mineral that if you take off the cover, it absorbs all light in a 10-foot radius, a darkness stone? Would that be useful? And it would certainly be useful to anyone with true sight, right? Or echolocation or whatever. But again, if you've ever had players dealing with a darkness spell, it's nasty. It's a powerful ability. So just as you can have light emitting, you can have light absorbing mineral. You could also have elemental style stones. And I've thought of a few, but these have aspects of the four elements in the rock that can be useful to the players. So lava stones, or whatever you might want to call them, emit heat, right? They provide enough heat if you're going into some Arctic area, and it's heat that can be modulated. And then one of the add-ons, maybe this heat stone, if you throw it into water, there's a huge, steam effect or something. And so when you're thinking about these exotic minerals and the ore that comes from them, you think about things that they can provide to the user, right? So another idea is sort of vitality stones, right? Where you have these stones that once per day, you can take this stone in your hand and it gives you 10 hit points back. Or you can use it to gain temporary hit points if that's how you want to work it. But somehow the stone has this restorative property. Could it be passed around to other users? I don't know. You got to decide, does it just work? As I said, my tendency here is once per day, but you could do it in more ways than not. In a similar way, you could have a stone which placed on a wound or something, in the hand or on the wound or whatever, stabilizes somebody. So somebody's going to die and it stabilizes them and returns them to zero. Yeah, again, depending on your system. But a healing stone, right? People all over the world claim minerals have all sorts of healing powers. I don't know how many of them really do. I'm no expert on it. But this would be one that actually does do that. And if it's, a constant once per day, that's how many of these stones can you get, right? That revolutionized medicine. And maybe it's just one single example that you have, and, it's venerated by these people who are held on to. No one knows the source. You have to decide with all of these. You don't want to unbalance things in your campaign. Another mineral could be from a plane, like the plane of chaos or law, evil or good. If you're using alignments, you hold on to the stone and you get a sense of detecting alignment, detecting whether it's just law and chaos, good or evil, right? Because it's from a plane, it's some extra dimensional stone that's been brought over, almost like a meteorite that's landed on Earth, that has these detection abilities. And we could go on, from some astral plane where if it detects astral creatures, it's okay. If it helps you see invisible, depending on what your system says. So in like Pathfinder, you're invisible. I still may know where you are and so it may give me a bonus on detecting you or striking you or whatever, but you're always going to be maybe only concealed from me or whatever. Again, it's one of these things that you don't want to be able to necessarily just see everything invisible all around you. I mean, again, how often does that happen in your world? But just bear with me on this, right? You could have that. You just don't want to overpower things. But the idea is this mineral itself from the astral plane, from the ethereal plane, or wherever you want, or just created by some mad, metallurgist, magic metallurgist, I guess there's a creation of something, has this ability, has this extra, it's an exotic mineral. Another thing to think about is, what is the purpose of a mineral in the real world, and how might an exotic one be beneficial or, I suppose, harmful to someone? I don't know. Because the one I'm thinking of is you have a stone, a mineral that mixed in the process of creating steel that has that extra hardness, such that when a sword is made with this, even if it's not magical, it's a +1 or +2, does more damage, maybe you get an extra attack. It's got a lightness to it that as you swing it so quickly that you can strike another strike, even if you don't have ability. See where I'm going with this, where just as, let's look at tennis rackets have evolved in their construction, right? With materials that are created for tennis rackets, of the old wooden rackets. Well, now we have exotic minerals, right? Well, now you're creating a sword out of this, or any kind of weapon, with this exotic mineral, and it has these capabilities. And the obvious ones too are like flaming minerals, or, lava. It's a black lava that crystals that when it strikes does an extra 1d6 fire damage or heat. I mean, these are very obvious, but they're also, if you have this access to this material, you can, forge these items. And one of the times, sometimes when we're thinking about, like in this case, substance minerals that provide some exotic fantasy power or capability, that we should not necessarily gamify it. And so I'm going to come up with some ideas about gamifying minerals. So for example, you have sort of a dust. You take the substance and you have this dust on it, and then you sprinkle it on a weapon, and it gives you a +1 bonus to hit for an hour. Maybe it's +3 more. I don't know what it would be. So this would be good for a battle, but it wears off. The dust finally goes off. Or maybe it creates, if you're in an early level of a campaign, makes that item magic for a certain amount of time. So you have this dust, you have a certain number of uses, and the players can use that. They're in some deadly battle. Are you going to use your dust here on your weapon? And when it comes to this kind of thing with the dust thing, now again, breathing in minerals can be kind of deadly. But if you breathe in this dust, you gain something, whether it's a strength thing, it gives you some strength for, again, an hour, a day, whatever it is. It angers you and gives you a plus in your intimidation checks. I mean, anything that you're doing in a system, you have this mineral. Maybe you mix it into a drink and you drink it, like a magnesium type thing or something, where it gives you some kind of game advantage that equates to a plus if you're the typical D20 system. And, some of these, let's say you have a quartz. I was talking earlier about quartzes and crystals that give you an arcana bonus. If you are staring into this when you're thinking about, some arcana thing. An opal that, you hold on to this and it has some kind of memory capability where it stimulates your memory and you get a plus in a history check or something. And you could have a powder that when you put it in, it helps you with your dexterity or acrobatic checks or whatever it is. The idea is this stuff has this capability. You can only safely use it once per day, right? You don't want to, get too much of this mineral inside you. And it's coming from this, and it's from an exotic material that's in this fantasy world where these kind of things exist. And that kind of relates to my main point here, is that in a fantasy world, everything you think about, every element of the world itself, the physical materiality of that world, and how could that be imbued, not necessarily with magic per se, but the substance itself for some reason. And again, I was using things like things that come from other planes or whatever, or, maybe there was some kind of magical conflagration that happened. Or, you really don't have to explain it. That's the beauty, because it's made up. It's a fantasy. You like to have some verisimilitude where it sort of makes sense. And that's why tying together with what do we use these minerals for typically, or how does it relate to something that sort of the player can see that connection, but it doesn't have to be. I have these little opals where I crush them and put them in thing and drink them. I get plus 10 strength for an hour, which would be pretty powerful, I guess. What's the connection with the opal? I don't know. Just when you do that, that's what happens. You have 3 of these, right? And it isn't necessarily just some magic item, because if you found it, this is where the players always get in. They're going to want to find more, right? So again, what did the mineral do in real life? If you want to make that connection, what makes sense for the substance when you think about it? And then what are the kind of game, things like having light or having darkness or having strength? What are the things? I forgot about the crystals that can call down lightning or something, right? They attract it, but you can, throw them out there and the lightning flashes there, and it just, you just get a range strike on something. Again, the mind starts going. That's the beauty of it. So I thank my Patreon supporters who inspired this when I created my Mine of Light, which is, mining out these light-bearing stones. Love to hear if you've thought about exotic minerals in your world, how you've used them. Hopefully this will inspire you with some ideas. Like, subscribe, all that great stuff. And most importantly, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.